In this video, we'll take a look at deploying Cisco IP DECT with CUCM. The first item we need to make sure is both the base station and the DECT phones are firmware version 5.1.2 or higher. The Cisco IP DECT base station and DECT phone is deployed as a third-party SIP device with CUCM, specifically third-party SIP device advanced. The DECT phone base station is going to be limited to basic calling when deployed with CUCM, and that is if you compare it to a desktop phone that's running enterprise firmware. The feature set offered with third-party SIP device advanced is very basic in sense. Also, the firmware for the IP DECT base station and IP DECT phone is not controlled by CUCM. It must be manually updated on the base station itself. Third item here is if you're going to be doing a multi-cell deployment, which is 2 or more DBS 210s, and if the network is using Meraki switches, IGMP snooping needs to be disabled on the Meraki switches. The reason being is they do not support IGMP version 1, which is used by the base station in a multi-cell deployment. Key note here in the bottom in red, this step should not be attempted unless the network admin understands if the network is supporting any type of high packet rate multicast traffic, since disabling IGMP snooping may flood the network and cause issues. And a footnote towards the bottom, in conjunction with disabling IGMP snooping on the Meraki switches, there's an option that needs to be enabled: flood unknown multicast traffic. And again, this is if you're doing a multi-cell DBS 210 deployment on Meraki switches. Step number 4, we're going to focus on CUCM configuration tasks. We're going to configure a phone security profile for third-party SIP device advanced for the DECT phone deployment. Configure an end user in CUCM for each phone that will be deployed. In this example, I have 2 DECT 6823 phones we're going to deploy. So for each 6823 phone, I will configure an end user account. We'll look at that in a few moments. Configure third-party SIP device advanced for each DECT base station that will be deployed. In this case, I'm doing a DBS 110, so 1 DBS 110. Step number 5, DECT base station configuration tasks. Okay, we're going to configure CUCM as a SIP server in a DECT base station. We're going to configure each DECT phone in a DECT base station that will be deployed. On the DECT phone itself, configuration tasks, we're going to register each DECT phone that will be deployed with the DECT base station. And then the last phase of this will be DECT phone testing. Perform site survey to ensure needed coverage is achieved in area in which the service of the DECT phone is expected to function correctly. And then once you have a working configuration, you want to back up the configuration of the DECT base station. As stated earlier, firmware 5.1.2, so 5.1 parentheses 2 is the minimum firmware that is needed if you're deploying Cisco DECT with CUCM. So you need to make sure 5.1.2 firmware or greater is in both the base station and the DECT phone. The base station DECT phone need to have the same firmware. They need to be in parity. So if you're using firmware 5.1.2, the base station has the firmware, and then also the DECT phones. And this is just a release note to kind of talk about the support of the DECT phones with CUCM, kind of when it was introduced towards the bottom right here, as you can kind of see. Key note to note here is you must configure the DECT base station for TCP transport. Also note, you must not use the base station MAC address when you add the DECT to the CUCM. Each Cisco IP DECT phone, 68825, this can also be a 68823 like I'm using in this video, is going to be a separate third-party SIP device advanced in CUCM. For example, if you have 100 68825 handsets, then you'll need 100 third-party SIP device advanced in CUCM. So basically what I'm going to be doing is for each 68823, my example I'll be adding, I'm going to be creating a fake MAC address, and you'll see that in a few moments. Please note, since this is a third-party SIP device advanced, it is limited to basic features. This kind of talks about some of the basic features. Making a call, answering a call, hold, transfer a call, conference are supported. So just be aware of that. Okay, so we're going to log into CUCM. This is version 15. And once we're logged into CUCM, top right corner, we're going to go to security here towards the bottom, and then phone security profile. Okay, we're going to go ahead and pull up the third-party SIP device advanced profile. So we're going to type in third, and we're going to click on find. Okay, we're going to select third-party SIP device advanced standard SIP non-secure profile. Okay, we're going to click copy. Okay, we're going to go ahead and add the following text at the beginning, DECT, for name at the beginning and description, DECT. The rest we're going to leave as is. We're going to select the transport to TCP, and we're going to enable digest authentication. This is so the password, if you will, what is called digest authentication is going to be enforced. The rest we're going to leave as is. Okay, we're going to hit save right here. Okay, we're going to go up to user and then end user. Okay, we're going to add a new end user. First user I'm going to call user 100. So user ID, user 100, last name, user 100. We're going to scroll a tad. And then here we're going to, for the digest credentials, which often on the phone equipment is referred to as a password. So in CUCM, just be aware this is digest credentials. And then I'm going to go ahead and type in the digest credentials. And if we look at the actual base station itself, they're calling it authentication password. So just be aware in CUCM, digest credentials equals authentication password on the actual base station. Okay, we're going to go on and hit save. Okay, we're going to add another user since we have two DECT phones we're deploying here. Okay, next user, I'm calling user 101. Last name, user 101. Okay, again, we're going to go ahead and configure digest credentials. Okay, we're going to hit save on the top here. Okay, now we have two users, so each user is going to be mapped to a DECT phone. Okay, I'm going to go to devices, top center. Okay, we're going to select phone. Okay, new phone. Okay, we're going to go down the list towards the bottom. There's going to be an option for third-party SIP device advanced. We're going to click on next. Okay, this is we're going to fill in the fake MAC address. So I'm just going to use this as my MAC address, fake MAC address, if you will. I'm going to hit tab. It's going to automatically add Celsius Ethernet phone with a fake MAC address. For the phone button template, we want to select third-party SIP device advanced, common phone profile, standard common phone profile. Okay, owner, user ID, user 100. And just note here, I'm doing this in a lab environment. This is a freshly installed CUCM. Basically, this is the first item I'm adding to it. Currently, I do not have any calling search spaces on this. In production environment, you typically would have calling search spaces. I have some additional information here if you need additional reading on the topic. But in a production environment, you would go and select an appropriate calling search space. Okay, towards the bottom of this page, device security profile. DECT third-party SIP device advanced, and then SIP profile, standard SIP profile, and then digest user is going to be user 100. Okay, we're going to click on save. We're going to hit OK. Okay, we're going to go ahead and configure line 1 here, top left corner. Okay, I'm just going to have this extension 2010, hit save. Another footnote, this being a lab environment, newly installed CUCM, I don't have any calling search spaces or route partitions. If this was a production environment, you would need to select the appropriate route partition. Right hand side, there's some additional information. Okay, we're going to apply the config. Okay, we're going to hit OK. Okay, we're going to also make sure we save the config. Okay, we're going to add, so this will be these next DECT phone we're going to be adding here. So again, we're selecting third-party SIP device advanced. We're going to hit next. So second 6823 DECT phone we're adding to CUCM as a third-party SIP device advanced. Okay, we're going to configure a fake MAC address. We're going to hit tab. It's going to automatically add the Celsius Ethernet phone with a fake MAC address that I typed on top here. Phone button template, third-party SIP device advanced, standard common phone profile. And again, this is a lab, so I don't have anything for the calling search spaces. In production environment, you'd want to select appropriate calling search spaces as before, some additional information on the topic on the right-hand side. Okay, user 101 for the owner user ID. Okay, device security profile, third-party SIP device advanced. So this was the profile we had modified, copied and modified earlier, the DECT one. So this is what's going to be enforcing the actual digest, user digest, if you will, or password, what is being called on the DECT base station. SIP profile, standard SIP profile, digest user, user 101. So that's the second user we created earlier. Okay, we're going to hit save. Okay, we're going to hit OK. Okay, we're going to go ahead and add a line 1, top left corner for the dial number. And I'm going to make this a 2020 for the extension. I'm going to hit save. Okay, apply config. Okay, we're going to hit OK. Okay, now we have our 2 third-party SIP devices configured in CUCM. And now we're ready to move on to the actual base station. We'll take a quick look here as far as how do you know what IP address the base station has. It is set for DHCP by default. One easy method is if you take the handset and you type in, basically hit the menu button, which is this top right corner button, 3 horizontal lines, and then we type in star 47 star, so star 47 star. And this is going to put the device, the handset, in site survey mode. As long as we're in the vicinity of the base station, typically I like to stand within a few feet, like 3, 4, 5 feet. Generally within a few seconds, typically no more than 30 seconds, it will actually show me on the screen of the DECT handset what it's seeing as far as local base stations. So this one's from my lab. I went ahead and I blanked out the MAC address, obvious reasons. The wireless side also has something equivalent to a MAC address. It's called RFPI. I've also blanked it out. But if you notice, it gives us a simple listing of the IP address of the base station. So we're going to web into that. So here's the IP address of the base station. In my case, it's the DBS 110. First time you enter the base station, it's going to force you to configure an admin password. That's what we see right here. So I'm going to configure admin password, hit save. Okay, then we're going to log in with the admin and the new password we just created. Okay, and just want to emphasize, we need to make sure the base station is at least a 5.1.2 firmware. The way the firmware is being listed on base station, it'll be in this section right here in the middle. but it'll start off typically with a 05 dash, in this case it's a 01-03. So this is fairly new firmware, but as a minimum you must have 512 firmware on both the base station and also DECT handset or higher. In this case I have higher firmware. I do have other videos on my YouTube channel that I show the process of updating the firmware, so you definitely want to do that before viewing this video and doing the deployment of DECT base station to CUCM. Okay, we're going to focus now going into the server section, top left corner. Okay, we're going to add a server. Okay, and then we're going to call this CUCM15, IP address of a server, .191. And then the only other item we need to configure is TCP for transport. Okay, at the bottom we're going to click on Save. Okay, we're going to go to Extensions. Okay, we're going to add an extension. Okay, so this is going to mirror what we had configured on CUCM. So the first DECT phone will be, the line on it is going to be 2010. So that's kind of what I'm putting here. So line name 2010, extension 2010, authentication username, that's a end user we create in CUCM. This would be the first user, user 100. This is the digest credentials. So what is called authentication password is digest credentials. So this is a screenshot right side from CUCM that maps to the digest credentials. Very important, because often this is confused with other variables in a config. So what is called here authentication password is the digest credentials. The reason I point that out, if you notice towards the top here, there's also a field that says password, confirm password. This is not the correct mapping for the authentication password. It is digest credentials. So just kind of keep an eye on this. This is the most often area of difficulty folks have when deploying third-party SIP devices with CUCM. In any case, here I have everything illustrated easily. So digest credentials maps to authentication password. And then we just want to make sure the server we configured a few moments ago is being shown on a drop-down. Okay, then we're going to hit Save. Okay, so you'll notice it's added a phone slot. There's no phone associated right now, no DECT phone, it's all Fs. We'll notice this will change once we associate a phone to the base station. We have a second phone we want to add, so we're going to hit Add Extension one more time. Okay, so for the second phone, the extension will be 2020. Okay, so line name 2020, extension 2020. This will be the second user we have created in CUCM, end user, if you will, user 101. Authentication password, which again maps to digest credentials. Very important that we don't lose track of that. Okay, display name 2020, and then we're selecting the CUCM we configured earlier, and we're going to hit Save on the bottom here. Okay, so notice now we have two slots, one slot per each handset. And then also like to put a unique access code for my lab. I'm just going to use 5544 top here, and I'm going to hit Save. This will be needed when we onboard the DECT handset to the base station in a few moments. Okay, so we're going to look at the handset itself. So I'm going to hit the menu button, top right corner, 3 horizontal lines. It's going to give me a listing of different icons. I'm going to select the chain icon right here, which is the connectivity icon. Okay, I'm going to select register. Okay, and then this handset was used previously with another base station. I'm just going to overwrite this first slot. So normally this would be empty, but since this had been registered for another test I was doing with a different base station, I'm just going to overwrite that. Okay, I'm going to say yes. Okay, the access code we created a few moments ago, 5544, hit OK. Okay, so normally this registration process can take anywhere from like 1 to 3 seconds up to 30 seconds. So right here, this process generally is a few seconds, typically up to 30 seconds. If you're exceeding 30 seconds, there's a good chance something may be wrong. So in this case, it just took a few seconds, it registered. Okay, and then we have the extension. So at this point of time, this phone is ready to make test calls. Okay, so this is my second handset, so second 6823 DECT handset. This one had not been configured with any base station, so this is kind of fresh out of the box. It does, as a footnote, I did update the firmware on it, so it does have matching firmware to the base station. In my lab, I have two base stations. I have a DBS 210 and also a DBS 110. I want to make sure I'm selecting the correct base station for this onboarding. So I'm just going to leave it on this first one. I'm going to click on Info, bottom right corner, and then we're just going to make sure it matches. Yeah, it matches. That's this one right here, .60, okay? So we're going to go back, and then we're going to basically leave it on this first one, and we're going to hit Select. That's the one we want on board to, okay? And then we're going to type in our access code 5544. We're going to hit OK. Okay. Starting the registration process. Again, this normally takes somewhere between 1 to 3 seconds, but generally not more than 30 seconds. If it's taking longer than 30 seconds, most likely something may be wrong. You do want to be fairly close to the base station where you're doing this registration onboarding. Okay. And then this one also has an extension. Okay. Okay, so if we go back to the DECT base station, so we're back in extensions, and you'll notice now the two slots that were empty are populated. This would be the actual information, the wireless, if you will, MAC address that was mentioned earlier that they have for wireless. Is not a MAC address, but a specific number for tracking wireless DECT devices. Each one has a unique. Blanking it out here for obvious reasons, but normally you would see an address here that looks somewhat similar to a MAC address. We notice both phones are registered. The first one extension 2010, second one extension 2020. They have the 513 firmware here. Again, I did this offline. This does have to be updated manually. CUCM, as I mentioned, since this is a third-party SIP device advanced, it does not have any mechanism of pushing firmware to third-party SIP device. So this would have to be done manually. And my suggestion is getting the firmware to the needed level, again, minimum 512 firmware or above, before even attempting to onboarding or registering it to CUCM. Battery level is good. And signal strength is very strong. This is within a couple feet of both of the base stations. Okay, and then if we go back to the main page here, home status at the bottom, we can tell that both of the DECT handsets are registered. So this is a really easy way to kind of tell what the status is. Status okay, and then this is the CUCM 15 server here. So each one's going to be a separate registration. That's why each one has its own third-party SIP device advanced. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3, 1, 3, testing, 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 1, 2, 3. Thank you for watching this video, deploying Cisco IP DECT phone with CUCM. Thank you.